and it always reminds me to record. So have a look if you want to see some of the great speakers we've had this past few years in particular. Their videos are up there, and it's a wonderful opportunity to sit down with a cup of tea Sunday afternoon or an evening during the week and just chill with some more unity. I now have the blessing of welcoming our guest speaker. I'm going to read a little bit about Carol Renee Johnson, also known as Njeri, which is her spiritual name. She has a master's degree in counseling and mental health and a BA in history with minor in secondary education. She's a licensed Unity teacher. She's actually a graduate in the same class as Dr. Ann and Debbie Leland. Njeri is affiliated with Unity of Gaithersburg, which is in Maryland in the United States. In addition to being a licensed Unity teacher, Njeri also sings with Spirit Sound, which is their church choir. She also serves in the church as a prayer chaplain, substitute youth ministry teacher, and platform speaker. Over the years, she has participated in Theater of the Arts, which is a performance group, and has sponsored fundraisers for the church. She is a very devoted Unity member, and I welcome her now as our guest speaker. You're muted. You're muted, Njeri.
Good morning. How about I'd like you to take a deep breath with me and just breathe in and hear these words. This is the day that the Lord has blessed, and I will rejoice and be glad in it. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in thy sight. Amen and amen. Good morning. My name is Carol Johnson, and I am also known as Njeri. I wish to thank Reverend C. and Ann for inviting me to do today's inspirational talk. During a conversation with Ann and my LUT cohorts, which Debbie was one as well, I shared how I use the 12 powers to support my son Najee, who has autism. And here is Najee to welcome us. Anne was impressed and asked me if I would be willing to give an inspirational talk at her church focusing on how I helped my son. I said yes. I would be honored and explained that it would be my first inspirational talk. I told her I would only do it if she agreed to support me, which she readily said she would. I bring greetings from University. I bring greetings from Unity of Gaithersburg in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and our minister, Reverend Dr. Edith Washington Woods. I am a retired school counselor who recently completed the requirements to become a licensed Unity teacher. My desire when I retired was to be able to teach at my church, which I have been recently able to do. My talk is titled When You Believe. I wanted to play this song, When You Believe, because the words truly capture the sentiment of my talk. I especially wanted you to hear and see the words. For example, many nights we prayed with no proof that anyone could hear. And we were moving mountains before we knew that we could. And I am standing here just hoping and praying for my blessings. And finally, who knows what miracles you can achieve when you believe. My intention for this talk is to share the power of believing and how we practice the 12 powers, sometimes cautiously, sometimes unconsciously. In my case, I didn't fully understand just how much I was drawing on the 12 powers until I wrote my final paper from the 12 powers class. As I reflected, I realized that each power was present in my journey as I secured the best services and resources for my son. I was amazed. Today, I want to share with you the power of believing and how unconsciously the powers showed up in my journey. When my son was diagnosed with autism, I knew I was stepping into a journey of learning, discovery, and advocacy his services, to gain his services. As a school counselor, I had access to professionals who could offer me guidance and support. Following his initial testing, I was told Najee would not walk, talk, or be toilet trained. I didn't believe that assessment. I was cautiously optimistic that one day he would do all those things and much more. I made a commitment to myself that Najee would be as independent as he could be, as much as his abilities would allow. At about the age of 6 years old, the state of Maryland passed an autism waiver. This waiver had been well fought by parents in the state of Maryland. Autism was just coming into awareness, and parents were advocating for the state to put in place services and supports for parents, financial services, because it became very apparent that dealing with children with autism was very expensive because you had to try to get services, get caretakers to come in and help support you. So I heard about the waiver, but I did not immediately apply. I just thought that it really meant that it was tied to my salary. And as an employee of Montgomery County Public Schools, I didn't think that I would qualify. Well, as it would be, I received a letter from the state of Maryland asking me if I would please apply. They did not get the number of kids they needed to implement the waiver. So would I please apply? I took the letter to his school at that time and I showed it to the school psychologist. And I said, I don't know. What should I do? He said, you should apply. So together, he and I filled out the paperwork. He was familiar with the paperwork and I applied. And once the paperwork had been sent into Department of Maryland, Department of Education, I got the word that Najee had been accepted into the uh, Maryland Autism Waiver. What that meant was that now not the waiver would pay for the services that Najee would be now receiving and pay for people to come in to my home to work with Najee, also pay for his education. So when I say he was twice blessed, he was twice blessed. Now, in order to take advantage of these services, I, as his parent, needed to do all the research about the autism waivers, the services they provided. I had to interview various programs and schools that the waivers would financially support. I took an 18-month unpaid child care leave from my job to do all of this research. When he was under the age of 21, I researched schools with wraparound services. That is, that there were teachers, counselors, and specialists who could address all of Najee's disabilities. Because he was not only autistic, he had apraxia, which is a motor planning speech disability. He had anxiety, and on top of all of that, he had ADHD with the hyperactivity being his diagnosis. So I needed some place where all of those things could be addressed. So while searching for school placement, I toured the only private school in Montgomery County that provided the wraparound services. That was called Ivy Mount. I went to Ivy Mount and I toured the school and I was very impressed. I loved everything I saw. It had everything I thought that Najee would need in order to be successful. Once the tour was over, they took those of us parents to a room to talk about now the most important thing, how much it was going to cost. At that time, that was in 2001, it was $60,000 a year. And I was like, okie dokie, Najee will not be coming to Ivy Mount. It was just outside of my pocketbook. So now what do I do? How do I find a program for Najee? What's out there? What's available? What can I do? What can I do? So I got the idea that I would call the Autism Society of Montgomery County and ask those questions. I had a 2-hour conversation with a parent who told me that she believed after our 2-hour conversation, I told her all about my son, about his disabilities, and where he stood, that I just didn't know what to do because I couldn't afford Ivy Mount. So at the end of our 2-hour conversation, she told me that she believed that Najee would be a perfect fit for a small public school called Carl Sandburg. I said, oh, I never heard of Carl Sandburg. Is it in Montgomery County? Yes, it's a public school in Montgomery County. And I said, okay. And this school has wraparound services? Yes, it has all of the wraparound services that you're looking for. And it only has 112 students. She further told me that it's Montgomery County's best kept secret. They really don't want a lot of parents to know about this program. Because if Ivy Mount costs $60,000, you could just imagine what the public school would cost. So I contacted the school's social worker and I told her that I wanted to place Najee at Carl Sandburg. She said, well, since you are MCPS, we will work with you to get him in. Okay, all right. Blessings, blessings all around. He was interviewed, placed on probation with the understanding that if he was a good fit, then he would be accepted. I said, okay. So that was in June, and I had to wait the entire summer because they had him all summer long. Now, one of the key things to get into Carl Sandburg was that he must be toilet trained. So Najee was about 6 years old. He had gotten toilet trained by 5 years old. So I was like, okay, so now that should not be a problem. So I said, okay, if he gets into Carl Sandburg, that would mean that he would be able to have a typical school experience. He would be able to go to elementary school, then to middle school, and then to high school. And in addition to the high school program, they had an OJT program, which is on the job training. He would be able to do job placement. Okay. And in his role in job placement, Najee got the opportunity to work he worked at CVS, he worked at Kohl's, he worked at Target. His favorite place to work was at the school bus yard where he got to wash the buses. And he came home excited about having the opportunity to wash the buses, particularly the windows. Okay? So once again, I just believed that Najee would be accepted, and he was. There, he learned to read, he learned to write his name, he learned to tell time, and he learned the important skill of how to ride a two-wheel bike. And as a person with autism, with ADHD, which means that all it has to happen is a bird will fly by and his attention is gone, Najee learned how to ride a two-wheel bike. And I understand they're not offering that skill anymore in that program. So once again, he was really blessed. When he graduated from the Carl Sandburg and into Rock Terrace, which was the middle school and high school component of the Carl Sandburg program, he went into what they call transition. And transition means that he has to now transition into adult living. That meant that now I had to go back into my research mode and find a program for him. Now, please bear in mind that I was, as I said to Ann this morning, I was a pioneer in all of this. There wasn't someone else I could go to, like parents come to me now and ask, how do I maneuver through the autism waiver? I had to do this on my own and learn how to navigate the autism waiver and services to make Najee's life work. So once he transitioned out of high school, for those of us who went to college knew that the next thing we had to get ready for was to go to college. Well, the next thing Najee had to get ready for was to go into some kind of an adult plan. And I want you to know this was like applying to college. Okay, remember when you applied to college and you had all of those applications spread out on the table, and you had your safety school, you had your first choice, and you had your school that if your safety didn't work or your first choice didn't work, you had that school right there in the middle that, hopefully you would get into. Yeah, that's what I was into. That's what it was like. I had these schools spread out, these programs spread out in front of me. Remember when you had to go tour all the colleges and listen to all the reps and listen to them tell you, oh, how we love to have your child here. Yeah, I went through all that. And then the letters came, then the rejection letters came. Yes, that's what happened. So I had to tour at least 3 schools, 3 programs, and then prioritize them. So my first program that I wanted him in was St. Coletta's of Greater Washington, D.C., because they had what they call a 5-day habitation program, which means that 5 days a week, Najee would be in a program. Not all the programs offered that. So you need to know I really wanted that program for Najee. So I went after it. I did the research. We did the tours. I went in. I called them. I stayed on top of them. I wrote the thank you letters. I said, I really would like to see Najee into this program. And then I got the word. Najee has been accepted into St. Coletta. Yay! So I'm on my way. Come August, take Najee to St. Coletta, only to find out his name's not on the list. And I said, hmm. And I want you to know, Mama Bear took over. And I said, yes, Najee's name is on the list because the director told me that Najee had been accepted. And they said, oh, he's no longer with us. And I said, that's too bad. Najee's on the list. and he's going to come to St. Coletta. So the new director said, oh, I gotta get this man. So Najee was accepted into St. Coletta. 5-day habitation program, and that is where he is today. Now, Charles Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, taught that the 12 powers of man are 12 faculties of mind. Each faculty functions through the nerve center in the body. They are spiritual gifts that all of us inherit, every individual, awakening our conscious recognition and use. Once I became aware of these powers, they stopped being just a teaching and became a living, breathing part of my daily life. That's what happened when I realized I had been using each of these powers, though unconsciously, in supporting Najee. So now we're going to briefly review the 12 powers using the definitions from Dr. Paul Hasselbeck's book, Power Up. So take 30 seconds and read this quietly to yourself, and then we're going to move on to how I use them with Najee. Okay? Now, let me share with you how I discovered that I was using these powers to ensure the best opportunities for education and independence for my son that his abilities would allow. I am going to go over each power that supported me on the journey, okay? In the same order as the slide that you just saw. First, faith. To believe in my son's potential despite the prognosis. I was always cautiously optimistic that even though his prognosis said that he wouldn't walk and talk and all that other stuff, I was going to practice faith. I was going to believe that he would defy that prognosis. Strength to persevere through every challenge. Yes, since there was no plan on how to get through the autism waiver or how to do it or how to implement it or who to call or how to make it all work, I persevered through each challenge. Wisdom to strategically navigate and apply for crucial services like Carl Sandburg, because the county paid for Carl Sandburg to be there and paid for all of his services while he was at Carl Sandburg. He had a person who came to the home to work with him within the home. Somebody had to access the services, get in touch with the companies who could hire the person to come into the home to work with him in the evenings. Yes, I had to strategically navigate through all of that so I could get him the services that he needed. Love to fuel my desire for Najee's success. Yes, I stayed cautiously optimistic that he would defy the prognosis. And you will hear later that he did. But at his graduation, I had a friend of mine to come to sing at his graduation. And I told her, I want you to sing this song for me. And she said, what's the name of the song? It's called You Are Amazing. You will do amazing things, because I really did believe that Najee would do amazing things. Power to master the information needed to make informed decisions. I had to master all of that. I had to master all of that information, and I had to make decisions based on the information that I had. Imagination, to visualize him thriving in a school with comprehensive support. I had to visualize Najee thriving. You know, people don't talk a lot about one of the downsides of children with autism, and that is that they can be violent. And Najee did not escape this. There was a time that we went through with Najee being violent. And by that, I mean being hit. Yes, I was hit. One time I was picked up and thrown across the sofa. Yes. And I was fortunate through the autism waiver to be able to hire a young man who came in, who worked with children with autism. And over the next 9 months, he worked on training Najee because Najee didn't know who I was, that I was his mother. He did not cognitively understand that, and that he did not hit me, he hugs me. He did not understand that he was not to hit his sisters, that he was to hug them. And so we went through that whole period. But still, in my imagination, in the power of an imagination, I visualized him thriving. I visualized him us getting his behavior under control and getting him to a place where he could function as a good person in society. And so I taught him, once were able to get that behavior under control, I taught Najee manners. I taught him how to speak. I dressed him well every day so people wouldn't be afraid of him. All of these things that went to into my imagination that I may come to fruition through him. Understanding, to research and evaluate all of the programs, all that was available, pull it all together and put together a functioning program for my son. Will, to make difficult choices of the best school and programs for him. I was always in the midst of making difficult choices because a part of the waiver, there were things that you had to make sure that you were included into his program. So I was always in the midst of making sure that everything was there that that he needed and that the waiver would approve of in his programs. Order, to organize all that information that I had gathered, and zeal, to enthusiastically begin to process finding these resources and getting them implemented for him. And yes, I had to come into those programs and those tours enthusiastically. You couldn't go in there and go, oh yeah, I just hope my son get. No, you had to come in there with an attitude of positivity, and that you wanted this for your son and or your child, and this is how you would like to see this manifest. And that was my zeal. My elimination was crucial. The power of elimination was crucial to release all doubts about his future and my own abilities to get this done. Remember, there was no guideline, there was no path to follow. I created my own path. And life, to bring energy and vitality to every aspect of his life. Today, I am happy to report that Najee is 32 years old. He walks, he talks, and uses the toilet independently. It took him longer than most, but he did achieve it. He is largely independent, though he still needs staff support to live safely, to manage health, and his physical needs. He cannot just go to the doctor because of his apraxia, his speech impediment, he's not able to articulate to the doctor what's going on. So he has to have someone to take care of all of his medical needs and all of his physical needs. He has to go to the dentist once a year. He has to have a physical once a year. Someone has to make sure that all those things are taken care of. And as his legal guardian, guess who it falls on? Me! He works, he knows how to use his own debit card. He uses that very well. He knows how to pay for all his food. He navigates his community, which was by design because I purposefully moved into a community that had a small strip mall where he could walk to the strip mall and he could go to Subway to get his food. He can go to the dollar store to buy deodorant and toothpaste. And I took him through all of those journeys and taught him how to do all of those things. And now he can do them independently. He rides the Metro Access alone to and from his job. He works part time in the kitchen, enjoys getting the free lunches, and wakes himself up in the morning to get ready for prompting. Najee is also known as DJ Najee, which has really increased his self esteem. He brings music and joy to others. He is happy, well adjusted, loving, caring, kind, and generous. He lives a vibrant life. Unity teaches the spirit that was in Jesus is in you. That means that the same powers, the same potential, the same spark of divine dwells in each of us. My unwavering faith in God and belief in Najee's potential helped transform which seemed like a devastating prognosis into a story of growth, independence, and joy. I invite you to reflect, where in your life are you already using the 12 powers? Maybe without even realizing it. And where could you do it more intentionally? Take one power this week, maybe faith or strength or love, and practice it consciously in a real situation. Watch how spirit moves through you when you do. As each of us live from our divine powers, we not only transform our own lives, we light the way for others. I wish to thank Reverend C. and Ann for granting me this opportunity to share with you today. And so it is. Ashe, Ahim, Aho, Namaste. Blessings.